in the quiet town of Aurora, Texas. The year was 1897. It was a time of lanterns and horse-drawn wagons, long before the first airplane ever left the ground. But what happened one spring morning would ignite a legend, raise questions that science still can't answer, and leave behind a body, not human, buried in a small-town cemetery. Over a century later, whispers from within NASA would breathe new life into the mystery, suggesting the story was not folklore, but fact. This is the true story of the Aurora UFO crash and the alien in the graveyard. April 17, 1897, Aurora, Texas. The town had just begun to stir when a loud metallic screech split the air. According to a report in the Dallas Morning News, residents looked up and saw what they described as an airship, a cigar-shaped craft with bright lights, moving erratically across the sky. The craft appeared damaged, listing to one side, sparks flying from its body. Seconds later, it collided with the windmill on Judge J.S. Proctor's property. The resulting explosion sent debris flying, damaging a nearby water tank and scattering fragments across the land. Locals rushed to the scene. What they found was beyond comprehension. Among the wreckage was a small body, described as not of this world. The pilot was humanoid, but its skin was discolored, its eyes unusually large. It wore a strange suit made of unknown material. The townspeople, unsure what else to do, gave the creature a proper Christian burial. They placed it in the local cemetery under a modest headstone, reportedly engraved with a crudely carved flying object. The story might have faded into obscurity. Just another odd tale from the 19th century, if not for a single article published 2 days later. Reporter S.E. Hayden of the Dallas Morning News described the crash, the alien body, and the burial. For decades, skeptics called it a hoax or a publicity stunt. But strange things began happening in Aurora. Visitors who went searching for the grave often reported interference with electronic equipment. Camera batteries would die. Compasses would spin. There's claim to see lights flickering between the headstones or shadows moving across the cemetery at night. But perhaps the most unnerving twist came in the 1970s. In 1973, a man named Bill Case, aviation writer for the Dallas Times-Herald and Texas State Director of MUFON, reopened the case. He traveled to Aurora, interviewed surviving residents, and documented the original burial site. One of those who joined the investigation was E.L. Lovejoy, a NASA contractor and engineer. Lovejoy's findings were never officially published by NASA, but leaked reports claim he analyzed metal fragments recovered near the old Proctor property. He allegedly concluded the material was composed of an aluminum alloy unknown in 1897. And more disturbingly, he claimed the debris bore microscopic anomalies that suggested precision machining beyond the capability of the time. Lovejoy also visited the gravesite. His instruments went haywire. Whatever was buried here, he reportedly said, was not from Earth. Shortly after his alleged statements, the headstone vanished. The grave was disturbed, but the body was gone. No one saw who took it. Several elderly locals, including Mary Evans, who was 15 at the time of the crash, told investigators in the 1970s, "It happened. The town buried it. We didn't know what else to do." Her voice trembled as she recalled seeing the tiny coffin lowered into the earth. Another resident, Charlie Stevens, claimed he watched the craft fly overhead while milking cows with his father that morning in 1897. His father forbade him from going into town, fearing danger, but they both saw it. Their stories, spoken decades apart, matched in detail. No embellishment, no fame-seeking. Just quiet conviction. By the time the site was gaining national attention, the headstone marking the alien's grave had been removed, likely stolen. Ground-penetrating radar in the 2000s did detect a disturbance consistent with a grave, but the object within had unusual magnetic properties. The cemetery board refused to allow exhumation. Later FOIA requests to NASA about Lovejoy's involvement were stonewalled. No record of his employment. No acknowledgement of any materials retrieved from Aurora. But internal MUFON documents, later leaked, show that Lovejoy was not the only government-connected individual interested in Aurora. At least 3 separate defense contractors had sent informal representatives to the site. Between T-73 In 1976, something or someone wanted the Aurora mystery buried permanently. Today, the town of Aurora plays it safe, sometimes hosting UFO festivals, sometimes downplaying the story altogether. The burial marker is long gone, the cemetery locked at night. But visitors still come. Some leave flowers. Others leave strange gifts, tokens, crystals, even old coins, on the spot where they believe the alien lies. And some report seeing a faint blue glow in the grass just before dawn, as if something or someone is still there. It's not resting, just waiting. The Aurora, Texas crash may have happened in 1897, before Roswell, before modern aviation, but it remains one of the most chilling, most well-documented early alien encounters in American history. And if the NASA engineer was right, it wasn't just a crash, it was a cover-up. Eerie drone shot over an African savanna, slowly fading into the tree line of Rua. On a warm September morning in 1994, the children of Aerial School in Rua, Zimbabwe, were let out for recess. A regular day at a private elementary school just outside the city. Minutes later, dozens of them would come running back, pale-faced and crying, telling the teachers that a silver disc had landed just beyond the trees, and strange beings with huge black eyes had stepped out. At first, no one believed them, till the number of children who claimed to see it reached over 60, all describing the same thing in chilling detail. It's one of the most credible mass alien encounters in history, still unexplained today. This isn't folklore. It isn't a hoax. This is the true story of what the children saw. The bell rang for mid-morning break around 10 a.m. About 62 children, aged between 6 and 12, ran out into the schoolyard. The school sat on the edge of a vast expanse of rural land, brush fields and tall grass stretching to the tree line. It was peaceful, isolated, nothing but wind and birdsong. Then, the children noticed something strange in the sky. At first, they thought it was a plane, or maybe a helicopter, but it wasn't moving like either. It began descending, slowly, steadily, until it dipped behind the trees, and then the screaming began. Some said they felt sad, others terrified. The older kids ran to the edge of the schoolyard, peering past the trees. That's when they saw it. A shiny silver craft resting in the tall grass. And then they saw something else. Two beings stepped out. They were short, no more than 4 feet tall, with oversized heads and pitch-black eyes that seemed to stretch across their faces. Their skin was pale gray, and they wore tight black suits. They moved with a strange, gliding gait, almost weightless. According to multiple children, one of the beings locked eyes with them. And in that moment, they felt something enter their minds. One girl, 11-year-old Emma, claimed the being spoke to her without words. It was like pictures in my head, she said later. It showed me the earth. It was burning. It said we were doing something wrong. With the technology, dozens of students would later confirm the same thing. An unspoken message about the environment. The dangers of greed, the loss of nature. Some said they felt sad, others terrified. Eventually, Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize-winning author, traveled to Zimbabwe to interview the children himself. One boy described the moment. I felt like I couldn't move. Like time stopped, another girl said. It was like it knew everything I was thinking. I couldn't hide. And just as suddenly as they had arrived, the beings turned and walked back toward the craft. The disc lifted off the ground, shimmered in the light, and vanished. The children ran back inside, crying and yelling. Teachers assumed it was just playground drama, until they saw the look in their eyes. Many were pale. One had wet herself. Several were shaking. When asked what happened, they all started talking at once. The stories were identical, the details disturbingly specific. The next day, a local UFO researcher named Cynthia Hind arrived to interview them. She had no agenda, just a curiosity. She separated the kids by age and had them draw what they saw. Every drawing showed the same thing, a silver disc. 2 small beings, and giant black eyes. Word spread quickly. Eventually, Dr. John Mack, a Harvard psychiatrist and Pulitzer Prize-winning author, traveled to Zimbabwe to interview the children himself. He expected fantasy, or at least exaggeration. What he found shook him to his core. He recorded hours of footage, young children, alone and in pairs, recounting the event with zero variation. Their eyes didn't wander, their voices didn't waver. They were not making it up. Dr. Mack concluded that the children had genuinely experienced something traumatic, and not of this world. These are not delusional kids, he later said. They saw something real. Despite mounting evidence, the story was largely dismissed by the global media. Some accused it of being a mass hysteria event. Others claimed the kids saw a prankster in a mask. But the problem with those theories, there were no adults outside, no tracks, no props, no footprints near the alleged landing site, which showed signs of scorched brush and electromagnetic disturbance. And over the years, many of those children, now adults, have spoken out again. None have changed their story. In 2021, a new documentary revisited the site. Adults who were once those children cried on camera, still haunted by what they saw. One of them said, "It was real. We saw them, and they saw us." Over 60 children at a remote school in Zimbabwe all claimed the same thing, that beings from another world visited them and then disappeared. They had no reason to lie, no knowledge of aliens, no cultural context for flying saucers. What they saw that day in 1994 may never be fully explained, but the message they were left with was clear. Something is watching us. It doesn't like what it sees. On the night of October 11, 1973, two men stood fishing on the banks of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. They were co-workers, friends, regular blue-collar men. But what happened to them that night would send shockwaves through the nation. They said they were taken, paralyzed, floated aboard a craft by mechanical, non-human creatures. But it's what happened after they gave their statement that made even the police believe them. Because when the men were left alone in an interrogation room, thinking no one could hear them, their terrified whispers told a different story. The kind of truth you can't fake. This is the real story of the Pascagoula Abduction, and the secret recording that proves it may have really happened. Charles Hickson, 42, and Calvin Parker, 19, had clocked out from the shipyard and headed to their favorite fishing spot. The sun had just set, and the warm night air buzzed with insects and the sound of water lapping the shore. Then, without warning, a high-pitched worry noise filled the air. Blue lights lit up the trees around them. Hovering just feet above the water was a football-shaped craft, glowing softly, completely silent, except for that droning hum. Before either man could move, a hatch opened, and something floated out. 3 beings descended, gray-skinned, robotic-looking, with no visible eyes. Their limbs were stiff, their hands like claws, their heads shaped like bullets, with pointed projections where ears should be. The beings didn't walk, they glided. One touched Hickson, and suddenly, he couldn't move. His body locked in place. Calvin felt a pressure in his head, and then he too went limp. Both men felt themselves rise off the ground, pulled toward the craft by an invisible force. They were paralyzed but fully conscious. Inside, the world shifted. Hickson described being examined by a strange floating device, like an eye, scanning his body from head to toe. No one spoke, no one touched him. But he felt violated, exposed. Parker, more sensitive and younger, said he passed out from sheer terror. When he woke, he was lying alone on the bank, arms folded like someone had gently placed him there. The entire encounter lasted about 20 minutes. Shaken and pale, the 2 men staggered to their car and drove straight to the sheriff's office. He didn't ask for attention. They begged for protection. Sheriff Fred Diamond was skeptical, until he noticed how genuinely terrified both men were. Parker was shaking so badly he could barely hold a cup of water. So the sheriff and his deputies tried something clever. They left Hickson and Parker alone in the interview room and secretly recorded them. The hope that the men would let their guard down and admit to a hoax. Instead, the tape recorded the 2 men breaking down in private, whispering to each other. Hickson, Jesus Christ, son. Is there gonna come back? Parker, I've never been this scared in my life. Hickson, what are we gonna do if nobody believes us? Parker, I just want to die. Their voices cracked. They weren't putting on a show. They were reliving a nightmare. That tape still exists. It changed everything. Word got out. Newspapers ran the story the next day. UFO investigators, reporters, and skeptics flooded the Pascagoula area. Both men agreed to lie detector tests. Charles Hickson passed. Calvin Parker refused at first. He was too traumatized. But later in life, when he did take one, he also passed. Over the years, multiple new witnesses came forward. Fishermen, a local Coast Guard officer, all saying they saw strange lights over the river that night. One even claimed to have seen the exact craft hovering above the tree line. For decades, Calvin Parker avoided the spotlight. He moved away, got married, and tried to forget what happened. But in 2018, after Charles Hickson had passed, Calvin released a book. He claimed the beings visited him again in the years that followed, sometimes in his dreams, sometimes in real life, said they left marks on his body and sometimes messages in his head. In one interview, Parker said, "They weren't here to hurt us. They weren't here to help either. They were just studying. Like we were animals in a cage." He believed the government knew more than it admitted, and that the truth would eventually come out. Shortly before his death in 2023, Calvin Parker gave a final interview. He said, "I know what happened. I don't care if no one believes it. But one day, when they finally come for everyone to see, I won't be around to say, 'I told you so.'" His eyes filled with tears. "I just hope they treat us better than we treated each other." The Pascagoula Abduction remains one of the most well-documented alien encounters in history. Two men, no fame-seeking, no contradictions, and a secret police recording that still sends chills down your spine. Some encounters leave behind photos, others leave behind scars, left behind the truth, caught on tape. In the dead of night, between Christmas and New Year's Eve, 1980, something landed in the woods outside of British airbase jointly run by the US and UK. What followed was a string of silent alarms, scrambled soldiers, and strange lights that couldn't be explained or denied. But the deeper you look into it, the darker it gets. Because this wasn't a weather balloon. This wasn't a misidentified lighthouse beam. This was a military encounter. Multiple eyewitnesses, high-ranking officers, official memos, audio recordings, and physical evidence, all buried for decades. This is the real story of the Rendlesham Forest incident, Britain's Roswell. At around 3 a.m., U.S. Air Force personnel stationed at RAF Woodbridge, near the twin base at RAF Bentwaters, noticed strange lights coming from the forest bordering the eastern perimeter. Two patrolmen, John Burroughs and Jim Peniston, were sent to investigate. What they found was not an aircraft, and it wasn't from Earth. Through the trees, glowing in a silent clearing, was a metallic object, triangular, about the size of a small car. Hovering just above the ground, its surface was dark, almost liquid-like. Lights of red, blue, and white pulsed along its base. Through the trees, glowing in a silent clearing, Peniston later described symbols etched into the craft, like hieroglyphics, but not from any known language. When he touched them, he felt something, an intense download of energy, like images flooding into his mind. Then the object silently lifted off, and vanished between the trees. Just 2 nights later, December 28th, the lights returned. This time, Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, Deputy Base Commander, led the response team himself. He brought with him multiple security personnel, a Geiger counter, and an audio recorder, still publicly available today. As they approached the clearing, their radios crackled with static. Animals in the nearby farms panicked. The air grew charged, like before a lightning strike. Then the lights appeared again, dancing through the trees, darting at impossible speeds. In his audio log, Halt is heard saying, "There's no doubt about it. There's some type of strange flashing red light ahead. It's coming this way. It's definitely moving." He said he experienced missing time, and later had binary code sequences flash in his dreams, which, when decoded by a civilian computer expert years later, included coordinates to ancient, mysterious sites around the globe. The Geiger counter registered high radiation levels at the original landing site, something had returned. Within days, an internal memo titled Unexplained Lights was filed by Colonel Halt and distributed within UK defense circles. But when media requests came years later, the Ministry of Defense denied it was of concern. They said it posed no threat to national security, a phrase used frequently when they want people to stop asking questions. But soldiers on the ground told a different story. Peniston, the one who touched the craft, later claimed he received threats. He said he experienced missing time, and later had binary code sequences flash in his dreams, which when decoded by a civilian computer expert years later, included coordinates to ancient, mysterious sites around the globe. He never sought fame. He never made money. But he never changed his story. By the late 1980s, whispers of the event began leaking. A few former airmen spoke up. But the full story didn't go public until 1994, when a Freedom of Information request forced the British government to release the Halt memo. The world finally knew something had happened in Rendlesham Forest. But even with the memo in hand, skeptics tried to explain it away. Some blamed a lighthouse beam. Others claimed the men were disoriented. But nothing explains how trained U.S. military personnel misidentified a light beam for a physical craft that left burn marks on trees, indentations in the soil, and spiked radiation. Nothing explains the audio recordings of fear, confusion, and direct observation in real time. Nothing explains why, for decades later, those who were there still speak of it with terror. In 2010, Colonel Charles Halt signed a formal affidavit stating, "I believe the event was extraterrestrial in origin, and that the US and UK governments have actively suppressed the truth." Let that sink in. A high-ranking US officer, with no history of delusions, hoaxes, or publicity stunts, putting it in writing, under oath, that what they encountered was not from this world. To this day, no official investigation has explained what happened in Rendlesham Forest. Because maybe they already know. Rendlesham wasn't a case of one witness, or two. It was dozens. Soldiers, officers, radar operators, all with matching stories, all ignored or silenced. They didn't want attention. They didn't want fame. They just wanted answers. And they never got them. On the night of November 5, 1975, in the forests of northeastern Arizona, 7 men were driving home from a long day of logging work. They were tired, muddy, ready to be home. But before they made it back to civilization, something appeared in the trees, glowing, silent, hovering. One of them got out of the truck, and he never came back, not for 5 days. This is the terrifying true story of the Travis Walton abduction, a case so shocking, so well documented that even skeptics struggled to explain it. Travis Walton, 22, was part of a logging crew in the White Mountains near the town of Snowflake. He was with 6 other men, riding in a crew truck after a long day cutting timber. As they drove through the dense forest at dusk, a strange glow appeared ahead. At first, they thought it was a fire, but as they got closer, they saw it hovering above the forest floor, a bright, metallic, disc-shaped craft, humming softly, maybe 20 feet in diameter. The truck skidded to a stop, and Travis did the unthinkable, got out. The other men screamed for him to come back, but Travis crept toward the craft, staring up at it in awe. Then a blue-green light shot out from the underside, blinding, violent, and fast. Travis's body lifted off the ground. His arms and legs flailed for a second. Then he froze midair like a puppet on a string, and was thrown backward like a rag doll. He hit the ground hard, motionless. The men panicked. They sped away, convinced Travis was dead or taken. It took them 10 minutes to collect themselves, turn around and go back. When they returned, Travis Walton was gone. The crew immediately reported the incident to the Navajo County Sheriff. 6 men, dirty, shaken, exhausted, all told the same story. A UFO. A beam of light. Travis gone. No one believed them. The sheriff suspected foul play. Maybe a fight had broken out. Maybe Travis had been murdered. The next morning, search teams scoured the forest. Helicopters, dogs, dozens of volunteers. They found nothing. No blood, no tracks. Just an empty patch of dirt where something large had burned through the forest floor. The remaining crew were all given polygraph tests. 5 passed. 1 was inconclusive due to stress, but none failed. Suddenly, it wasn't a missing person case. It was a national mystery. On November 10th, 5 days after he vanished, Travis Walton suddenly reappeared, stumbled into a gas station phone booth in Heber, Arizona, over 30 miles from where he disappeared, disoriented and shaking. He called his brother. When police arrived, they found Travis weak, dehydrated, and terrified. He kept repeating, "They hurt me." At first, his memory was fragmented. But over the next few days, flashes came back. He described waking up inside a room, metallic, sterile, with soft lighting. Above him stood 3 beings, small, bald, with pale gray skin and massive black eyes. Travis fought back, grabbed an object, and tried to escape. They didn't speak, but he could feel their intent. They were calm, clinical. Travis fought back, grabbed an object, and tried to escape. That's when he was confronted by a different kind of being. Humanoid, taller, with long blonde hair, wearing a smooth, tight uniform. They led him into another room. He blacked out again. The next thing he remembered was waking up on the side of a road near Heber, just as the craft lifted off and vanished. The story exploded. Travis Walton took multiple polygraph tests over the years and passed. He took psychological evaluations. No signs of mental illness, fantasy proneness, or delusions. Skeptics attacked the case for decades. They claimed hoax, misidentification, hallucination, but no one could explain the central truth. 6 men saw Travis hit with a beam of light and vanish, and 5 days later he came back. Not a scratch on him, but a haunted look in his eyes that never quite faded. In 1993, the case was adapted into the Hollywood movie Fire in the Sky, but Travis hated it. The depiction of the abduction was exaggerated, too horrific, too alien. What he experienced, he said, was more clinical than cruel, more detached than demonic. "They didn't want to hurt me," Travis later said, "but they didn't care if I was afraid. I was an object, a problem to fix, something they had broken." Today, Travis still tells his story. He doesn't charge thousands for appearances. He doesn't chase attention. He just remembers. And every time he walks in the woods, he looks up. The Travis Walton abduction remains one of the most credible alien cases in history. Multiple eyewitnesses. A missing persons report. Past polygraphs. A man who never changed his story. Not once in nearly 50 years. He was taken. He was returned. He's never been the same.